Welcome. Last week, I was throwing some bowls in porcelain, and I hope that it inspired you to jump into this different clay. It is a little more difficult. It does take some practice, but I think the outcome is also outstanding. I do love porcelain. Now, today, it has dried slowly in a damp box, and it's now ready to trim. But just like anything with porcelain, it is a little more tricky than if you're dealing with stoneware or earthenware. So let's go ahead and check out the bowl. As I mentioned last week, when you're trimming porcelain, there's something that's good and something that's a little more challenging. On the good side, it is very smooth. Usually you don't have any grog in the porcelain, so you can get it super, super smooth and nice. There's no jumping with your tools. The hard part is that if you do make it thin, which is sort of a purpose with porcelain, I don't make it super, super thin, but I do make it thinner than I do with stoneware. And if it is thin, it's a little more fragile when you move around with it. You can very easily push it out of shape. And when you turn it around to trim the outside and maybe trim the foot, like I will do here, it's a little more tricky. In this example I'm going to show you, I will show you a way to turn it around. Maybe two different ways, but let's go ahead.
The first step is to recenter my bat with the bowl on my layer of clay. I can't tap center this, so I'm just using a manual technique for this. It's okay. Next, I will just feel with my hands how even the inside is and how thick the walls are. I think it can be really difficult to see on a white surface of porcelain like this. But using your hands, you can feel it. And now I'm ready to trim. And there's a little bit of bumps on this one. So I'm just trying to even that out to get a perfect curve on the inside to begin with. After trimming the inside, you may want to smooth out the surface. You can use a flexible rib, a metal rib like this, to do that and get rid of any trimming marks that you left during the trimming. In this case, I want to keep a relatively smooth inside. To get rid of the little scraps and crumbles inside, I use a heat gun. Because using that, these little pieces are going to dry out fast, and so they are easy to remove. Just be careful when you do that you don't smudge them into the clay. Sometimes I also use a soft rib to sort of burnish part of the inside to make it just super smooth. In this case, it's just the very center of the bottom of the inside of the bowl. You can also use your finger. My thumb seems to work pretty well for this. Now it's time to release the bowl from the bed, which can sometimes be a little bit tricky. In this case, I need to fight a little bit, but it's getting there. So now we can turn it around and trim the outside and the foot. And for that, I have a bed where we attached some foam. That's going to make it much easier to control and stabilize the bowl when we're trimming the outside. That bed, of course, also have to be sort of centered and ready for the bowl. In this case, I can just grab onto the foot, turning it around, and put it on this bed. Of course, you have to be very careful, be very gentle, because it is very thin, it is porcelain, so you can easily distort the rim of the bowl. When trimming the foot, I start out by cutting a perfect circle. So I'm cutting from the top down instead of from the side in. Because if I do that, I cut like a perfect circle with whatever centering the bowl have. And if you can see, the sides are pretty well centered, but the foot is a little off. So by cutting from the top down, I cut a perfect circle, and that is needed for this bowl because I'm gonna cut a foot. And now you see I pushed it a little bit, so I can push it back into position. Just be very careful when you do that. Lift up the pot and move it, because if you just push it, you're gonna warp or distort the sides of the bowl, of course. But now it's getting back into position, and I'm getting ready to trim the inside. The first thing I do is I mark up the inner part of my foot. That way I have a guide, and I can also see if it's perfectly circled, so I get an even width of my foot, and in this case it looks good. I also tap it to see how thick it is. The deeper the sound, the thinner it is, the higher the pitch, the more clay we have. And now it's time to remove the layer by layer the clay inside the foot. I start out by using the corner of my trimming tool, because that's going to apply the least friction to the bowl so it doesn't get pushed around. I sometimes tap the bowl to see how thick the bottom is. The deeper the sound, the thinner it is, the higher the pitch, the more solid it is, and I have more clay I can remove. It's important when you're trimming the foot that you don't apply too much pressure to the pot, because then you will create a bulb on the inside and eventually you could cut through the whole bowl. I'm starting out with very small tools, but then as I go, I move up in size, and in the end, to get a smooth surface, I use this more wide trimming tool like this, and that's gonna help me create a smooth surface, which I like. Now I am ready to finish the outside of my foot rim to just make it very smooth and nice. I always flatten the top, which of course is the bottom where it's going to sit on the table, and I round off the corners because I don't want too sharp corners. Very sharp corners tend to chip off, so don't get tempted. They look nice when you make them, but in my experience over time they chip off. So just make the corners a little bit round. And now I can perfect where the foot connects to the walls, and then I'll start trimming the walls. They don't need so much trimming, but they do need, in this case, a little bit of smoothing. I want to follow the same curve as I have inside on the bowl, and just smoothen out any little bumps and inconsistencies. So. After signing my work, I use a heat gun. Not so much to dry it out, but just to make it a little more firm. Because after I trim the foot, I'm getting into a softer part of the clay. And now if I grab onto it with my hands, I'm gonna distort that beautiful foot ring that I just made. So drying it out just a little bit helps with that. But don't dry too much. Porcelain is very fragile, and if you do, you may end up with crackles and flaking offs and stuff. So be gentle, just give it a little bit, enough so you can hold on to it. So let's try one more before we move on to the next step. And yes, there is a next very interesting step. So please keep watching or jump forward because you sure want to see that. This bowl also have a few bumps on the inside. To trim them away, I'm using this wonderful multi-purpose trimming tool from Mod Tools. I use that a lot. I really like it. It's very good for scraping off bulbs like this without applying too much pressure. Because again, this is a very wide bowl and it's a very thin wall. So if I apply just a little bit too much pressure to this, I'm gonna push it out of shape. So I'm just, again, going to shave it off rather than pushing it into the clay. This bowl, I don't want it smooth inside. Instead, I'm actually highlighting the trimming marks and making these little circles or swirls. It's a little bit difficult to see on the video, but I think later on you will be able to see. That kind of creates a very gentle texture on the inside of the bowl that just kind of gives it a little bit of life that I like for this one. And again, I'm using the heat gun to get rid of those little scraps. Trying to remove them at this stage by hand is just going to smudge them into the sides of the bowl. And of course, you don't want that. So, I think that looks good. But for this, I need, as you can almost see, I need a trimming bed that's bigger. And I have one here, very big. But
To use this, of course, I need to remove the splash pan. So it's going to be a little more messy. Going to have the scraps all over the floor, but it's easy enough to clean. The only thing is that once you put scraps on the floor, I don't like to reclaim it because it could be dust or particles or whatever kind of things that shouldn't be in clay. So I'm just going to check how thick it is, and it's actually quite thin at the sides. So I'm going to add this. And for these pots, I have enough of a foot to hold onto it and turn it around. In case you don't have that, you will instead have to put the bat on top of it and then turn your pot. Also, if it's very, very thin, you may not be able to do it like that. But for these ones, there's just enough of a grip here to do it. Then lift it up a little bit when you move it, otherwise you will warp the sides. So. nice and light. Now I finished the trimming of my porcelain bowls, and I could just let them dry. And now I don't need to put them into the wet box or the damp box. At least it worked for me here, because they're already leather hard or soft leather hard. But I'm not gonna do it that simple, as you probably know from me. I'm gonna do something with strings. I'm gonna do some decoration with strings. I'll show you how that do. I will be using an engrobe, which in my case I know different recipes for that, but basically I take some of the scraps, the porcelain scraps, dry them out, and then I mix it with water, and I add colorants. So in this case I'm going to do two different ones, a black one and cobalt. And of course cobalt is, you know, if you work with it, this is a cobalt stains. It's pink until it's fired and glazed, and then it will turn beautiful blue. But let's go in and see an interesting way to create something nice on your bowls. You can also do it on vases and stuff, but I will do it here on my bowls.
I'm using this thread. We use it for packaging, and it have to be thick enough for the engrobe to stick to it, but not too thick to leave too heavy marks. So experiment a little bit. I was just lucky to have this lying around, and it worked really well for this. So I'm just going to start out by applying the engrobe to the string. I'm going to keep the two ends free, because I'm going to hold on to that with my hand. And then the tricky part here is to separate. I'm going to make two marks at one time, which of course makes everything more difficult for me, but that's how I like it. And so keeping these two strings with the right distance is it's a little challenging, as you will see, because of course they're swinging back and forward. And then you need to apply them so you get the whole length of the string to the side, which I need to sort of throw them down. And that's going to leave this mark with the engrobe. In this case, it's a black one that I'm starting out with. But yeah, it's a little bit tricky. Oh, there we go. As you see, I can't really control exactly where they land and how much apart they are. But that's sort of the beauty with this design. There's a element of luck, but I think it turns out really interesting. So then I move on, in this case, with the second color, where I used a cobalt stain. So yeah, it looks sort of pink now. It will be blue when it's fired and glazed. And for that, also using a string, and I'm soaking it in and just mixing it around a little bit to make sure that the engrobe is attached to the string. But in this case, instead of using a double string, I'm just going to use a single string, because I want most of it to be black, but just like a few marks with the cobalt. So again, I'm just trying to see. I want to put it in between. Yep. And here I'm going to put it on the side. Yep. It's difficult to see now, because it is only very light marks that this cobalt stain is leaving. But trust me, when it's fired, and especially when it's glazed, cobalt have a very strong, beautiful blue color. And I'm gonna use it. Yep. You see there, it didn't actually make a full mark, but I kind of like that. It's of course a matter of taste, but I think it turns out really beautiful. So let's do a few more. Same theme, same method, but of course it's not going to turn out the same. And that's what I really like about this. I'm not trying to do identical factory kind of pottery. I want to make unique pieces, and this does make it very unique. And it's just a lot of fun to play around with. In case you make it totally wrong, you could potentially scrape it off, but you would need to sort of trim it off. And if you already have a very thin pot, I'm not sure that's advisable. But I like it just being spontaneous and a little bit chaotic. So that's how it is with me.
It looks nice. I think it looks nice. A little bit sort of Japanese. So now I finished the trimming of the porcelain bowls and they're ready to fully dry. Then they will be bisque fired and next I'll give them a glaze, but I'm just going to give them a clear glaze. So the only colorful part of it is the decoration I made with the engrobes. But I just want to show you one of them. This is because it's not the first time I make these ones. This one is already bisque fired. This is ready to glazing and to glaze fire. Now, when it comes to firing of porcelain, it's also a little bit different than stoneware. The bisque fire is almost the same. We bisque fire the porcelain to 1000 degrees. Some people bisque fire it a little bit lower, but this seems to work for us. The glaze firing, however, we go up to 1280 degrees Celsius, and there's a little bit of hold. So it's a little more than a cone 10. It's very warm. It's almost 1300 degrees in the end. However, when you do that with porcelain, you know it's the same with stoneware, but the higher temperature it gets, the more soft the clay gets. And at higher degrees, above 1200 degrees Celsius, it becomes very soft. And if your kiln is not strong enough, if your heating element is not strong enough, then it's going to take forever between 12 and 1300. And that's going to give the clay very much time to warp and flop. So ideally, if you want to make something very thin in porcelain, you need a kiln that have extra strong heating elements so you can keep up the speed of accelerating the heat from 1200 degrees up to whatever you end up with. We do have that here in this workspace. Anyway, I hope this inspired you and I will show you what it turns out when it's glazed. I'm looking forward especially to, this is just a one color combination with black colors. The other one I also use the cobalt, and that's always going to change so much when it's fired and glaze fired. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this and inspired you to jump into the dangerous magic world of porcelain. And if you did, please subscribe, share, write a comment, and come back again next Saturday at 5 p.m. Central European Time. I will have a new video. So until then, I hope you enjoy yourself.